Well, Lord Dannatt, the former head of the army, joins us now. Thanks very much for your time this evening, Lord Dannatt. After 20 years, 2 inquests, the family of Cheryl James still don't feel they've had answers. That's a real problem here, isn't it?
Of course it is. And the first thing to say is that one has huge sympathy and sorrow for the tragedy of Cheryl James losing her life. And one expresses huge sympathy towards her family and indeed the families of the other 3 soldiers who lost their lives at Deepcut 15, 20 years ago. It's a tragedy and nothing will ever replace Cheryl James's life and the life of her family. And all one can say is it's an ongoing tragedy for them.
Well, I guess one can say more than that. One can say they don't feel that they've had the answers to this now. What has to happen now for them to get that?
Well, it's difficult for them not to feel they've had the answers, and I understand that entirely. But of course, this coroner conducted his inquiry, his inquest, to the best of his ability and came up with the conclusion that he did. But there's no getting away from the fact that all was not well by a long degree at Deepcut 20 years ago. Nicholas Blake QC conducted an investigation into Deepcut in 2006, and the army accepted a lot of responsibility that things were not right there. A decision was taken to close Deepcut. In the intervening years, standards have improved. The budgetary regime has been such that it's not been possible to close Deepcut, and things have changed. But there's no getting away that things are not right. And I would say this to anyone listening to this and watch the shocking programme broadcast at 9 o'clock on BBC Two, that if I could just finish this point, that watch that programme, that if there are things that happen to them, there are allegations they want to put forward, they must come forward to the police. These must be investigated, because where things have not been done right, they need to be investigated. People investigated, if necessary.
The families, as you know, are calling for a public inquiry, and they will also, you'll also be very aware that you were the former head of the army. You must look back at some of this. It must have crossed your desk. Didn't you think, don't you wish you'd got to the bottom of that?
2 or 3 things. This has been investigated more than once. Surrey police investigated what the Royal Military Police had investigated, and it's been a case under investigation for some time. But I accept entirely that the army has found it difficult to deal with the allegations of sexual harassment and also with bullying. And bullying is endemic. It's
Should there be a public inquiry?
Yes, there should be a public inquiry. I think that's the only practical and reasonable response to this, because I think people have a right to know. But I would stress again that if there are individuals who went through training at Deepcut or indeed elsewhere and believe that they suffered bullying or sexual harassment that's not been investigated, they should complain, if they're still serving, to the serving police, to the service police, or to the civilian police.
It does
and these things will be... Let me finish this point. It's really important.
But I think you've just made that point before. It does sound as if the army still has a problem with women, that it started to recruit women, and yet actually it didn't give them any duty of care. It didn't allow them to get to padres when they needed them. They failed in terms of the women who needed help. And that hasn't changed very much today. You heard from the lawyer.
I think I have to reject that it hasn't changed very much. The position described in the programme at 9 o'clock was quite appalling. That was 20 years ago. Since the Nicholas Blake QC investigation into Deepcut in 2006, Ofsted now inspects all training establishments.
But this was a survey from 2014.
I'm sorry, Emily, you have to allow me to finish the answer to the question. Ofsted now investigate and inspect all training establishments, and in the last round of inspections, all were found to be either good or excellent. Things have changed, but there is always room for improvement. There can be no covering up. If people have felt that they've been abused or wrongly treated, they must complain, it must be investigated, and where there are wrongdoers, they must be brought to book even 20 years later. That's really important, because if parents are going to send their young people to the army, they must have confidence that the army will look after them and not abuse them. That's really critical, and that's what makes our soldiers really good, and we can't actually accept poor standards from anyone.
Lord Dannatt.